This is a rebroadcast of a classic Murder in the Black episode with audio enhancements for your listening pleasure. Enjoy. Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph. So this Thursday is actually a very special Thursday because it is our dad's birthday here on Murder in the Black. So we want to give a quick shout out to our dad. Happy birthday. And if you know, our dad actually does all our openings here and our intros here on Murder in the Black. He has that special voice like Keith Robinson on Dateline, and he keeps us in the loop. He sometimes does production here for us. So happy birthday, Dad. Enjoy your day. But we were actually going to get into our first theme because we're doing themes until we close out season 6 right before summer starts. So our first theme that we were going to dive into was cold cases. But MD is away because she has to take care of her family. A couple of her family members are sick. So y'all send some good vibes and some prayers her way. But we're going to dive into some listener choices. So shout out to Amari for sending us a suggestion. Chef Kiss, I definitely appreciated this episode. And if you have one, make sure you slide into the DMs on Instagram. We are Murder in the Black over there. But let's go ahead and get into our true crime case for today. Grab your coffee if it's the morning, grab your lemonade if it's the afternoon, or grab your wine if it's the evening. Either way, let's get into it. For this true crime case, I watched an episode of the first 48, and I have titled this episode here on Murder in the Black, The Unraveling. Around 6:45 a.m., a 911 call is placed in Gwinnett County in Georgia. A citizen is walking in Yellowstone Park. They notice underneath an oak tree, a woman is laying there, and the woman does not seem to be moving. She seems to be dead, and so they quickly place a 911 call. And the 911 responder is asking the person on the phone, is the person's chest going up and down? And the person on the other end of that phone call is saying clearly, no, they're not. I believe that this person is dead. What I would really love here on Murder in the Black is for us to have a 911 responder just to be able to walk us through why they ask some of the questions that they do. Intellectually, I can understand why they are asking this person and repeating some of the questions, but just to get a full circle of why 911 responders ask some of the questions that they do, because sometimes I really don't understand. It would just be great to get a full scope and a range. If you're listening to the show and you're a 911 responder, send a DM. I'm just saying. Would love to have you as a guest. Immediately, once the 911 responder realizes that they possibly could have someone on the scene who is deceased, they send out first responders and, of course, police to the scene. Once the police arrive, they find that indeed the young woman was, as the citizen suspected, deceased. She's cold and she has been shot dead. And if you've ever watched the first 48, the goal is to either have the case not necessarily solved, but to have as much evidence rounded up, so to speak, in the first 48 hours, because that's the key time frame, right? The clock has started. And they're collecting as much evidence as possible. Initially, there's no ID found on this body, and it possibly looks like it could be a suicide or a homicide because of the way that the body is found. But once the body is removed and taken to the ME, they're able to really kind of see what's underneath the body. And underneath this young woman's body is shell casings, but there's no gun found underneath. And the shell casings belong to a 9mm gun. And there's 2 shell casings found. Once they find these 2 shell casings, it makes a suicide unlikely, and there's no gun found either. Really, the fact that they didn't find a gun as well is what makes this suicide scenario unlikely, and also the fact that they found another shell casing. Suicide, for the moment, is ruled out. Now, the head detective on the case is Corporal Smith. And Corporal Smith is leading this investigation. And so their first course of action is to find out, who is this person? That's what they need to find out. So they don't find identification. And so the first course of action is to see if they see anything that would help them to identify who this person is. The young lady has several tattoos. She has a faith tattoo. Faith makes everything possible. And then she has like a couple of more tattoos on her body. They take pictures of these tattoos and release them to the public, hoping that somebody will see them on the evening news and call in and say, this is so-and-so. And 4 hours later, they still don't have anything yet. Nothing, nobody has called in. They also don't have any cameras in the park. She was only wearing boxer briefs, a t-shirt, a sports bra, Nike slides. She was very comfortable. Whatever she was doing in that park, she was comfortable where she was. They don't have a car. She didn't have any keys on her. She didn't have a phone on her. She just seemed to be comfortable with whomever and whatever she was doing. In a couple of hours, the police are still at 0. And then those couple of hours turn into the next day. And this case has been assigned to the Homicide Assault Unit there in Gwinnett County. The very next day, a family member reaches out to the Gwinnett County Homicide Assault Unit and say, we know who those tattoos belong to. Our cousin, Tori Lang, and she was known affectionately to her family and friends as Kiwi. Now, Tori was 18 years old. She recently graduated from high school with honors, and she grew up in Lithonia, Georgia. She wanted to be an electrical engineer, and she actually had an apprenticeship there while she attended college online. And she was the only child to her parents, Tori and Teresa. I think is an interesting dynamic there on the First 48 that you don't see on shows like Dateline and a lot of shows on Investigation Discovery, is that you're able to see in real time the detectives go out and have to deliver this news to the family members. And depending on how you handle that, like where you fall in your emotions, it may be too much. But you're able to see Corporal Smith and his team go out to Tori and Teresa Lang's home and tell them. But by this time, somebody in the family already identified these tattoos. And so they knew, even when Corporal Smith entered the home, that their daughter was dead. Corporal Smith delivered the news, but they're already aware. They're Corporal Smith extra information for his case to figure out what indeed happened to Tori. What he's made aware of is that the last time that they saw Tori was the day before. Tori came in and she was, normal to her parents, and she left out of the house and left in her blue Nissan Versa. She did have a car, but she did not have her phone. The parents had her phone. They handed that over to Detective Smith, which was a good thing. That was great information for the detectives to use. They take the phone with them as they get into the car, and they take it back down to the station to have it downloaded. They've also find out that Tori had been hanging out with this guy named Scoop, and he was someone that she had been dating for about 3 months. But the interesting thing about that dynamic is that no one knew his real name. They just knew his name was Scoop. And Teresa, Tori's mother, told detectives that when they realized that Tori did not come back home, she actually reached out to Scoop on Tori's phone and said, hey, Tori's missing. Do you know where she is? And Scoop never replied. They thought that was just odd, that he never said anything. They made a mental note to make sure that they checked out what was going on with Scoop, and make sure they figured out who he was. But Teresa also told detectives while they were in there talking to her that her gun was missing. Her Sig Sauer P365 9mm gun was missing. And when they heard that, they said, okay, well, that sounds like that 9mm gun matches the shell casings that were found underneath Tori's body. They had to obviously do a gun test to find out if that matched. They concluded that that was more than likely the gun that shot Tori. They said, okay. But the next thing that they had to do was they had to issue a statewide BOLO on that blue Nissan Versa because it was not in the area. It wasn't at the park. They knew that was a key component in finding out what happened to Tori. And if they could get their hands on that car, they really could make a big leap in the investigation. 5 hours passed by, and Tori's mother, Teresa, calls Detective Smith, and she has a lead for them. She said that she spoke with Tori's best friend, Austin. And Tori showed up at his house saying that she was going crazy. Tori was going crazy, claiming that she wanted to pay somebody to kill her. This threw investigators for a loop a little bit. They knew they needed to get in contact as soon as possible with Austin. So they retrieved Austin's number and they immediately called him. And according to Austin, he showed up to his house on Tuesday night, the night before, because Tori had his wallet that he left in his car. And she was not going to give it back unless he agreed to killing her. And she was just like, I just need somebody to kill me. And he said, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that, Tori. In his words, that's effed up. I don't want no parts. No, I'm not going to do that. He said that he had upwards to about $340 in his wallet. And he said he didn't, he was trying to talk her out of her derangement. But she was convinced that she wanted to have somebody kill her. And he said that that's when he saw the gun sitting in the passenger seat. And he asked her, where did you get that gun from? And she said, I got it from my mom. And he was like, well, I'm not going to do it. What are you going to do? And she just said, you're not going to do it. I'm going to get somebody else to do it. And that's when he claimed that she left his apartment. And so investigators said, this is a conundrum. Do you think you know of anyone else who would agree to do something like this? And he said, I don't know of anyone else. And they offer up Scoop, her boyfriend. And he said, well, yeah, I do think he would have done it for money. They said, well, do you know his real name? And he says, no, I only know him by Scoop. What I think is just amazing is that nobody knows this young man's real name. Her parents, her best friend doesn't know his name. It's odd. The first 48 hours is pretty much over. Here's what we do know. We know that it is Tori Lang in the park. We've identified her. We know that Teresa's gun, Tori's mother's gun, was stolen. It's a 9mm gun. And we believe and pretty much have identified that Tori had a gun in the car with her and she was offering or asking people to shoot her. She was suicidal, according to Austin. She asked Austin, but Austin said no. We know that the car still has not been recovered and neither has the gun that was used to shoot her. The police are still in the groundwork of this investigation. They don't have a whole lot here. That's still something to go off of. Detective Smith figures, I need to get the Geo-Fence records. And you might be asking yourself, what are the Geo-Fence records? What does that mean? Well, that's a special warrant that police have to get, and that warrant actually takes time. That's not a warrant that you can get and you can get it back quickly. A Geofence warrant is a formal request from law enforcement to a provider, usually Google, to provide the location history data of every device within a defined geographic region and within a specific time frame. Those two factors, the location and the time, are the most important elements of a Geofence warrant. They want to see where you were and what time frame were you where you were during that time frame, right? He said, I need this, but it's gonna take time. That part of it sucked. While he put that warrant in, the car was recovered, which was a good thing. And they found it in a nature preserve, which was less than 2 miles from her house, but it was 3 miles from the park. But while that was a good thing, it was actually torched. So it was on fire, which this wasn't the best thing, because that means that all the evidence and any fingerprints, any DNA, any physical evidence that was in the car was now gone. Whoever did, they knew Tori and were familiar with the area. They were unable to retrieve anything from it. And the last person that they really could talk to, because the last person who saw Tori was Austin. So they had to go back and they had to circle back and talk to Austin. And it wasn't because they felt like Austin wasn't truthful. It was more so because Austin, well, you're the last person who saw her. Did you hear anything else? Has anybody else said anything to you about it? Let us know. And so they paid him a visit at his apartment. And Austin repeated the same story that he gave them on the phone. And he said, if I hear anything, if I see anything, I'll call you guys and I'll let you know. The detectives said, sounds good. On their way out, they just looked around the apartment complex. They looked at his neighbors and they noticed that one of his neighbors had a doorbell camera, a Ring camera to be specific, and they said, let's go knock on this neighbor's door. The neighbors just so happened to be at home. They asked that neighbor for a specific time frame, and the neighbor said, sure, I have that surveillance footage, and they said, can you send that over to my email? The neighbor said, no problem. Listen, I believe I've said it here on our main platform, but I know I've said it on our subscription. The surveillance that is in our world today is amazing. And there are some really good things about technology, right? Like, I'm that person where I really believe that there are some good things about technology and there are some bad things about it. There are some things that I just absolutely hate, especially being a parent. And the flip side of it, the good thing about it is this for me. It's the security surveillance. And whether you like it or not, there is always someone watching. It's either your own surveillance that is watching or it's your neighbor's surveillance that is watching. I really believe that there is legislation that is going to have to be written to catch up with the laws. I firmly believe it because there is more and more surveillance. Smile. Big Brother is watching. He's always watching. Believe that. Always know that. They get a copy of their surveillance and they walk back to their car. And as I said before, if you haven't watched the first 48, you probably have if you're an avid true crime sleuth. But just in case you haven't, you're able to get in real time what the detectives are thinking. And the Detective Corporal Smith says, I think Austin knows a little bit more than what he's saying. I don't know what it is, but I don't think he did anything. I just think he knows a little bit more. If in fact it's something, I guess we'll see whatever it is when we get back to the office. They head back to the office to review this Ring camera. And if you know anything about Ring cameras, right? Ring cameras, Wise, Kangaroo, whatever it is that you have, security camera, they usually record in intervals unless you have the one that just records all the way through. Like you pay for the the one that just records all the way through, right? And this particular citizen had the one that records in intervals. They had the footage at 10:30 p.m. on Tuesday night. And they caught Tori arriving, and he opens the door, and then he walks, and so then it stops because it's an interval, right? And then it picks up when he walks behind her, and you hear him saying, "You're really scaring me." And then she says, "Why am I scaring you?" And there's no video of Austin returning back to his apartment. That's it. Now, what you have to understand is Austin's first story to investigators was, she came to my apartment to return my wallet. That's when she was outside of her mind, deranged, telling me that she was not going to give me my wallet back unless I killed her, basically bartering with me for my wallet in exchange for killing her. I told her no, she was just outside of her mind. I'm trying to help her. So to see this footage, and she's very calm, docile, reserved, and he's the one who's saying, "You're scaring me," and she's saying very calmly, "Scaring you for what?" It doesn't add up to his story. Like the theatrics that he put into his first story, it just doesn't seem to be what he was saying. It seemed like he put a little sauce on his first story. So, yeah, I hear you, bro, but it don't seem to be everything that you're saying that it is, right? And to be fair, detectives are like, he's saying that he came back, but it's an apartment. You don't always have to go back up the same way that you came down. So he could have went back up another staircase and went back to his apartment. He didn't have to pass by his neighbor's camera in order to go back to his door. So they also couldn't understand if she really was so suicidal and you were scared as what you claimed. Why would you not call somebody? Why wouldn't you call her mom? Why didn't you seek help? But all of this doesn't add or equal to anything. It just kind of suspicious. It just 1 + 1 ain't equaling 2. It doesn't mean that you did anything. Your original story kind of doesn't match what we're seeing on camera. The truth of the matter is that the police had a couple of more leads that they had to pursue before they deal with this suspicion. The biggest thing with detective work is that you can find something suspicious and something to be odd, but you should be allowing the evidence to lead you. If there is no evidence there, then you cannot pursue it. You are bound by the evidence, or at least you should be, right? 2 months into the investigation, they still haven't talked to Scoop, but they finally get a hold of this person named Scoop, and they find out who he is. Like, they find out his name, honey, because what? And we don't even need to know his name, right? Because eventually they find out who he is, find out his real government name, and they're able to eliminate him as a suspect. They're able to substantiate his alibi, and he is cleared as a suspect. A couple of weeks later, Detective Corporal Smith was promoted, and he handed off this case to Angela Carter. And Angela Carter had a military background. She was a first grader, so to speak, in terms of her career as a detective. And she had some nervousness about taking on this case because she was new to her role as a detective. But she had a background which I think just complemented this case to help drive her passion and her efforts to solving the case. Tori was an only child, and Angela had just one child herself, and she spoke to the fact that that is what really drove her passions and fueled her passions into solving this case, because she really understood how Tori and her family felt, how Tori's dad felt, which his name is Tori, and Teresa felt about their child, because that's how she felt about her only child. And so I think what you bring as a detective to the case, sometimes your own background can be the very fuel you need to really, provide that effort to solve the case. Now, I will say about the first 48 that the first 48 is really a crime show that is centered around the detectives solving the case. It is not a victim-based show. It does highlight, do not get me wrong, it highlights the victims. Obviously, it's the detectives solving their case, but you are really able to see in real time how the detectives solve the case, how they take steps to solve the case. You know, you're able to see what a Geo-Fence warrant means and how they go about carrying out several different warrants, how they present the protocols to the DA before they can even go and get a warrant. You're really able to see all the different steps that they have to take in order to carry out the justice that you see on a Dateline, that you see on Mean Girls Kill, on Investigation Discovery. But I have to say that you're really not able to capture the intricacies of the victim, like who they really, really were on an intimate level. If you're more interested in that, in capturing who the victim is in a more intimate way, that the First 48 just may not be your show. Dateline is. And that's why people tend to love Dateline. You walk away from a show like Dateline feeling like, I knew that person. I love that. But I wanted to, kind of the difference between a First 48 and a Dateline. So Tori Lang's family, we really don't know how they necessarily felt about the justice part of Tori Lang. We do know they wanted justice for their daughter, but we don't get to hear from them a whole lot in the First 48. We just don't. But we do know that they carried out a candlelight memorial for their daughter in Yellowstone Park. And they did that several times throughout the 2 months that they were waiting for police detectives to solve this case. 2 months later, as Detective Carter takes on this case, she's waiting on those Geofence records to come back from Google. She's still waiting. But what they do have now is the internet search history from Tori. They have what she was searching in her search history, and the Geofence records and the search history are two different things, just to make sure that is clear. In her search history, she's searching to see ways in which she can make money. That is really what is apparent in her search history. That's what she wants to find out. But Angela really wanted to talk to Austin again. As I said before, Austin was the key in this investigation. He just was. Like it or not, Austin was the missing key because he was the last person to see her. But Austin was dodging her calls. Austin did not want to talk to her. He wasn't picking up the phone for her. And an additional 2 months passed by. Finally, Austin picks up, and we don't know why. We don't know if he gets a new phone. He finally picks up the phone for her. And he tells her kind of the story of how he met Tori. He says he met Tori in the 9th grade. She seemed cool, but she had problems. They kind of made a relationship for themselves where they were best friends. And it seemed like he was more of her friend than she was his. And Tori had money problems. She wasn't allowed to drive her car unless she paid for insurance. And that made her upset because, she had to take Ubers to work, which kind of took money out of her pocket. And she wouldn't be able to make money. On the night of the murder, Tori shows up at his door, and she was just kind of standing there looking weird. And they go downstairs and they start to talk. He says that's when he saw the gun in the car. And she said that she didn't want to be there anymore. And that's when she starts to talk about how, she wanted to take her life. And he just, began to, tell her, Tori, no, talks her out of it. You don't need to do that. Everything's going to be okay. You have people that love you. And, she was adamant. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm done with life. And he says that she got in the car and left. Now, does this story sound familiar to you guys? Because it's sounding real different to me. Carter mentions at this point, does she mention about paying someone? Like, she's just like looking at her notes from Corporal Smith, like, what? And he says, no, she doesn't mention anything like that. And she says, okay. Do you know if she had any money, or did she have any money? And he said, no, I don't know if she had any money. So Carter then says, I was under the impression that she took you some money, or she gave you your wallet, and then, she was trying to pay you or pay someone to kill her. And he says, yeah, no, I don't know anything about that. Now, I want to kind of stop here and just say, here's the thing about a lie. When you lie, you got to keep up with your lie. You got to write your lie down. You got to put pen to paper with your lie. Unless you're a habitual liar, which if you're a habitual liar, then you can keep up with your lie in your mind. But if you're not a habitual liar, you're not gonna be able to keep up with your lie. So you're gonna have to put your pen to the paper with your lie so that you can come back to your lie later. Because he forgot that he lied. And investigators write things down. They write things down. They specialize in observation. That's what they do. They specialize in writing things down, paying close attention to detail. And, as Pops would say on Friday, got your Mr. Postman, okay? And that's exactly what happened. And so at this point, Carter knows something in the water ain't clean. And the unraveling of Austin begins. Before ending the phone call with Austin, she says, listen, Detective Smith has in his notes that she took your wallet, which had $300 or something in it from you before she left. Is that not right? Is that not correct? And he says, no, that's not right. She never took any money from me or my wallet. I stayed outside when she left, and I eventually went back inside. She eventually gets off of the phone with him and says, thank you for your time. I appreciate you talking to me. If I have any questions, can I give you a call back? And he was like, I don't know. I'm busy, so I don't know if I'll pick up the phone. In other words, I now know your number, so now I'm not going to pick up the phone. That's what that meant. I understand. I know what that means. That's bill collector talk. I now know your number, and so now I'm not going to pick up the phone. In other words, they get off of the phone. She affirms to the first 48 producers and the cameras, this has a lot of inconsistencies. This is seeming very suspicious. She is uncomfortable with her conversation with Austin because he's contradicting himself left and right. His story has completely changed. It's done a complete flip-flop. We can recircle back to what we know about the case. Tori took a gun over to his house. We're assuming that she was thinking about suicide. And I'm just going to throw in there that she was thinking about suicide, and this is just Steph's opinion, or defending herself or someone, right? That was Steph. That was all Steph. Or defending herself or someone. That was me. And they review the report, the ME's report, and they figure out the muzzle target distance. And the muzzle target distance is, obviously the distance between the gun and the head. And it's about 10 to 12 inches, which is not impossible for it to be suicide, but they just don't believe that that's suicide because of some of the blood splatter that was found on Tori. And it seems like there was, a transference there. Like somebody moved the gun or moved her hand or moved something on her body, which caused the blood to transfer. So it looked like somebody touched her. And then it looked like she was placed on the ground in a certain way. So, they're uncomfortable. And due to the conversation that Detective Carter had with Austin, she now believes that she has probable cause for Austin's cell phone records. She submits those search warrants for his cell phone records. Now we wait. 3 months later, Carter gets those Geo-Fence results from Google that she wanted. And there's no device or devices that are found in the park. while we were waiting for all of that, there was nothing found there as a result of those Geo-Fence records. I know, but don't become disheartened. The search warrant on Austin's cell phone records said that he didn't leave. That was a good thing that she got that search warrant. I'm going to tell you why. Because according to him, he said he didn't leave, and he said he didn't leave twice. He said it to Detective Smith, and then he said it to Detective Carter on the phone. Now, according to his cell phone records, they proved that to be a lie. Because at 11:05, his cell phone hits off of a tower off of Yellow River Park, or heading towards Yellow River Park. Let me say that. So 25 minutes after being seen on that Ring camera footage that they still had, cell phone records put him 4 miles away, heading towards Yellow River Park, where Tori's body was eventually found. They don't have anything after 11:05. So either his cell phone was turned off or he didn't have any service. And more than likely, his cell phone was turned off. They don't have anything going on until later on when his cell phone hits off a tower near Rock Bridge where the car was actually found. They have to talk to Austin. They need to talk to him because they need to figure out what are you talking about? Because now we can prove that you're lying. Now, before, we could just say that, it was inconsistencies, your story changed, but now we can actually prove that you're a liar. We can prove it through your cell phone records. We need you to tell us why you've been lying. They track him down to his apartment, which was the last place that was his known address. And they find out that Austin actually moved out. That leads them to a dead end. But weeks later, they actually come upon a big lead. Austin was picked up on an unrelated warrant in a different county in Georgia. And this was exactly what Detective Carter needed. So she drives down to the county in Georgia and decides to get the interview that she's been dying to have, right? Like, she has been trying to get in contact with Austin. He's been dodging and ducking her phone calls. She finally gets in touch with him and, she has a phone call with him. She really wanted a face-to-face interview with him, but she takes the phone call instead. So she gets to the interview room with him. Let me paint this picture for you guys. The interview starts with formalities. Detective Carter is like, hey, how you doing? And it's kind of like, really? How's he doing? But she's like being funny and shady on purpose. How you doing? You've been locked up in county. How's it going? She cuts to the chase. She's, listen, I'm not going to BS you. Something in your story doesn't sound right. She goes back over his story with him. We know that you've said that she comes to your apartment. She asks you to shoot her with the gun that she has in the car with her. How long did you stay outside to talk to her? And he says, well, I stayed outside about 15 minutes. And then he claimed he sat there for a minute before he walked back upstairs. So I know that didn't happen. So are you going to give me the real story or what? Are we going to keep doing this run around or what's up? Because she's like, I'm just going to knock down your lies. At 10:40, he arrives, and by 11:15, we have phone records that you were near Yellowstone, and his face literally changes. Now, he has a mask on, but, the eyes are the windows to the soul, and you can tell his eyes are like, oh, dang, they got me. And so he says, okay, listen. Tori gave me instructions to where she wanted me to put her car and the gun, but I didn't shoot her. I did not shoot her. She shot herself. Carter repeats the events of everything that happened. She goes back through, okay, she showed up at your house. She just repeats everything that he has said thus far. And so she was like, okay, so y'all wind back up. And I keep saying Yellowstone, but I really mean Yellow River, you guys. I know probably some of you have caught that, the really observant people, but it's Yellow River Park. So she says, okay, so y'all arrive at Yellow River Park together. What happens then? And she allows him to tell that story. She says, I need for you to tell me step by step what took place. And he says, okay, so we get out of the car. We're both walking. And she's still committed to carrying out the process. He claims that she's walking with the gun. And so he takes the gun from her and he puts the gun along his side and he's carrying the gun. He says that he attempts to hug her, but she pushes him away and grabs the gun from him and shoots herself. Now, there's only 3 people in the room during this interview. It's Austin, Detective Carter, and another detective. And the other detective says to Austin at this point of the interview, how many shots went off? And Austin said, just one. And then Detective Carter asked him if she fell back, and he affirms that she did fall back. Detective Carter asks, did you touch her? He says that he did not touch her. He just heard the shot. So he says he then just picked up the gun and he begins to follow her instructions on where she wanted the gun to be discarded and where exactly she wanted the car to be placed. He said that he discarded the gun in a lake. And I thought it was really interesting at this point where the questioning goes, because they say, you discarded the gun in a lake. What lake? And he says, a lake behind my house. And this lake apparently doesn't have a name, or he doesn't know the names. They pull up on their laptop like a map, and he shows them where this lake was behind the apartments where he was staying at the time. And he said that's where he threw the gun, because that's where she asked him to. And then he said that he discarded Tori's car, and they said, well, why would you burn her car? And he said, I didn't. I just left her car there in the wooded area. And they said, why would you turn off your phone headed towards Yellow River Park? And he claims that he turned off his phone because he was scared. Detective Carter kind of grilled him on this. Why were you scared headed toward the park? Because you didn't really know that she was going to carry this whole suicidal plan out. You just, you were trying to talk her out of it, right? What was the point of turning off your phone? And he said, well, I just was scared. So I turned off my phone because I didn't know what was going to happen once we got to the park. I was nervous, headed toward the park. And I felt like I wanted to turn off my phone. So I kind of just left that up in the air. They grilled him on that a little bit more. And they asked, once she shot herself, why did you not reach out to law enforcement? Because at that point, she had already shot herself. It was already a done deal. It's not like you wanted it to happen. You were trying to stop it. What was the point of you not reaching out to law enforcement? Why did you just carry out her instructions? And he said that he didn't reach out to law enforcement because he was Black and he just felt like it was going to look really shady. The fact that, there's this dead girl in the park. He's a Black man. And due to the racial tension, the racial climate, but I'm putting more intellectual thought to his thought process in the interview. But essentially, he was saying due to racial climate and Tori being light-skinned, his words, not mine, he felt like it was going to be a mess if he went to the police. And so that's why he didn't. He went ahead and carried out the instructions. And he knows that he should have just went forward and called law enforcement. But essentially, he was scared because, this is the world we live in. Detective Carter and the other detective on the case thanked him for his interview, and they told him that if they needed anything else from him, that they would be in touch. They know where to find him. Hello. And they concluded the interview. After the interview, producers talked to Detective Carter right outside of the county jail, and she felt like that didn't explain the blood splatter found in between Tori's thighs, which was that blood transfer that didn't sit well with her from the onset of the case. It really looked like somebody placed her body there and somebody actually shot her. It's what led her to believe that it was not a suicide and it was a homicide. His story doesn't match a suicide. It doesn't explain the blood splatter found in between her thighs. The fact that he said that he didn't touch her, it just doesn't match that. Also, it doesn't explain the 2 shell casings that are found underneath her body. She said, but what really made her happy more than anything else, right, was the fact that she absolutely got a chance to talk to him and got a chance to pick his brain. And he placed himself at the scene of the crime. He places himself there when the act takes place. 2 weeks after she has this interview with Austin, She's prepping everything for the DA because she thinks, and she knows really, that, whether it's accidental or not, a crime took place. She's prepping everything for the DA to see if the DA wants to charge him or not, because it's not up to her. She's just presenting all of the evidence that she has found in this case to the DA, and then the DA decides, do I want to pursue charges? And we know all of that. But that's why I really like 48, the first 48, because you see how all of this is presented to the DA, and then the DA decides, is this something we want to pursue or not? And the one thing that Carter says during this interview, where she's prepping everything for the DA to present to them, she says to the first 48 producers that she and Corporal Smith were so hyper-focused on the fact that they believed that Tori was suicidal. And they believed this because Austin painted this picture that Tori was suicidal. He was the person who created the narrative that Tori was suicidal. She showed up at his doorstep. She was suicidal. But they really had nothing else to believe, no evidence to believe that she was suicidal. So she kind of just stopped and said, I have her search history. What was she searching for in the days, weeks, months leading up to her death that would make me believe that she was suicidal? And she had talked to her mother and her father and, other things in her life. There was nothing else there. She decided to dig through both Austin and Tori's search history in the days and months leading up to Tori's killing, to see what was there, because she could not just hang her hat just on Austin's narrative, because Austin was proved to be a liar. We know for a fact that if Austin was guilty of nothing else, Austin was most certainly a liar. She had to take a second look at the evidence. She already was looking at the evidence anyway because she was prepping it for the DA. So as she was comparing their search history, she noticed that there was no indication in Tori's search history and no indication in her life. I also want to put that up there too, that Tori was suicidal. But what kept popping up in her Google search history was how to make money. I mentioned that earlier in the case. That was something that kept popping up in her search history. How to make money fast, how to make $1,000 quickly. That was just something that just kept popping up in her search history. Now, in Austin's search history, he was searching for ways to get a gun for $250. That was something that he was searching, a lot. Ways to get a gun for $250, how to get a 9mm for $250. He was trying to get a gun. She just put 2 and 2 together because 1 + 1, that equals 2. Austin needed a gun. Tori needed money. Tori got the gun. I'm saying got, but she took the gun from her mom and she was going to sell it to Austin. Austin convinced everyone that it was a suicide. Carter believed that Tori went over to Austin's apartment that night and Austin was going to give her money for the gun, and they went out to Yellow River Park to shoot the gun. And they shot off some rounds, and that explains the 2 shell casings on the ground. And it was an accidental shooting, and he accidentally shot Tori. In that case, there is no motive. It was an accident. He freaked out, and he created this narrative, and he dragged Tori's body over to the tree, which explains the body transfer in between her thighs, explains the 2 shell casings on the ground, and explains why her body was situated the way that it was. Carter putting all of these things together, she presents all of this evidence to the DA. And the DA feels like this is enough evidence to take it to trial. 10 months after Tori is killed, they deliver the news to Tori and Teresa, which is Tori Lang's parents, that they were able to obtain a felony murder and aggravated assault warrants for the arrest of Austin Ford for killing Tori. And we're able to see in real time Detective Carter tell both Teresa and Tori that they obtained these arrest warrants and that he was arrested. Now, he was still in the county jail when they were able to obtain these arrest warrants. It wasn't this big deal of arresting him and bringing him in. They just were able to transfer him over from Clayton County to Gwinnett. And the one thing that Tori's father, Tori, said was it was a great revelation for them, and they were able to have an exhale and really kind of began healing. And Teresa said that Tori was a really, really sweet and good child. And Carter just felt this case, as I said in the beginning, just on a deeper level because she could connect to it. She could relate to it in her own life. And she was happy that she was able to bring this family a semblance of justice for the loss of their only child. Now, they were unable to find the gun where Austin claimed he discarded it. But, Austin lied. He lied a lot during this case. And so we really don't even know if that's really where he got rid of the gun. The first 48 episode ends before Austin Ford goes to trial. However, he does go to trial in 2023. Now, it does end in 2 mistrials for a certain charge. But I want to tell you what he was actually found guilty for before I tell you what those mistrials ended in for the certain charge. He was found guilty on 2 counts of theft by taking and concealing the death of another. But 2 juries could not reach a decision on the charges of felony murder, aggravated assault, and the 2 counts of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony earlier in the month of August of 2023. Now, the DA, who is Patsy Austin Gadsden, announced in August of 2023 that she would not be pursuing a 3rd trial on those charges. And a judge sentenced Austin in August of 2023 to 20 years, with the first 10 years to be served in prison. He cannot have any contact with the Lang family. And on August 11th, the jury told the judge they were deadlocked 8-4 in favor of conviction in Ford's 2nd trial. He had faced a life sentence if convicted of felony murder for Lang's shooting death, which happened in July of 2021. So they just could not come to an agreement. And obviously the DA felt like they didn't have enough evidence to get a conviction if they were to go to trial a 3rd time. That is the case of Tori Lang. Takeaway. I think that it was appropriate that I named this case The Unraveling because that's how I felt while I was watching this case. I felt like I was literally unraveling. Like, you ever had necklaces that just get tied up, together, bunched up together, and you try to do it fast. And if you try to do it fast, you would end up just throwing it against the wall and being like, you know what, forget this. I might have to do this another day. I don't feel like messing with this today. But if you do it slowly, you'll eventually get to it. You got to take your time and figure out where the knot is, and eventually it will come apart. And maybe where you thought the knot was, it's not there, So maybe you can't start at the center. Maybe you got to start at the end and work your way to the center. And to me, this was the Tori Lang case. It literally had to be unraveled. And where you thought it started, it really was not that at all. And I don't necessarily think that, Austin was a bad person. And I think this brings up an issue of, I don't think it has to do with, are you a bad person? I had this conversation with someone the other day. It was about a work situation. However, I think that it's not about, is Austin a bad person? The reality of the situation is that we really don't know. It's presumed that it was an accident. But we don't know if they got out there to the park and he did not have the money. And because he didn't, he really wanted the gun. He ended up shooting her. We really just don't know what happened. Or maybe it really was an accident. Whatever the case was, is that when you tell a lie, when you don't tell the truth from the beginning, everything else, your character is called into question. And so that is really the root of the issue here. And there's some accountability for Austin. Whether it was an accident or not, you had a part to play in the death of your, air quotes, friend. Okay? And so there is something that you have to pay a penance for. And so I think the takeaway here is, when you lie, now I have to question everything about you and everything that you ever said to me. And don't get me wrong, right? Like, we all tell lies, and we all know everybody has told a white lie before. Yes, all of those things are true. But I think when you get into these situations where you lie in a situation where I need for you to be honest, I need for you to tell the truth, he just was lying so much that it was like, dude, like, come on. Like, I can believe nothing that you say. So who really knows what happened in that park? But I think the takeaway that we all can take away from this is that it is so important to be honest and to be forthcoming with everything. Like, to just lay it out on the line and say, this is what happened. And if indeed it was an accident, he went about it the wrong way entirely, right? Like, entirely. And we can unpack that. We could do a whole nother episode unpacking about how he messed up with that. But that's neither here nor there, because I think that's obvious. But I think that's really my takeaway, is that when you lie, then, just like the old folks say, you know what I'm saying? If you lie, you cheat. If you cheat, you steal. If you steal, you kill. I mean, you know what I'm saying? That's the end of the story, period. That's it. And because of that, look, he lied and then he killed. Look, girl, you know what? I know that's a sermon for somebody. I hope it's for none of you, but I'm just saying, we got to tell the truth. That's it. That's the end of the story, period. But thank you, Amari, for that crime case. When I got into the story and I looked more intently at Tori, I remember seeing her face online. So do you guys remember this story? Do you or have you heard aspects of this story today that maybe you didn't know about inside of this case? Let me know. Come back next week so y'all can hear the cold case that we're going to do for you guys. And we'll be back next week. Until next time, friends, this is Murder in the Black. I love you. Bye.
Tune in next week, July 31, 2025, for all new episodes for second half of season 8 of Murder in the Black.